Hi, everybody. So good to see all of you and be with all of you. How are you doing? Hope you're well. And for those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Dr. Ilana Nankin. I'm the founder and CEO of Breathe for Change, which if you're new to us, welcome. We're an organization on a mission to enhance the health and well-being of all of you, our amazing educators and students and entire communities. And I'm super, super excited to share with you today one of my favorite topics ever, which is mindful classroom management. I know behavioral challenges have been on the rise and are something that we deal with every single day as educators and leaders. And so I'm so excited to share some of the work that we've created at Breathe for Change and some tools and some practices for all of you so that you can walk away feeling a bit more prepared and ready for the school year to begin, but not too soon because y'all got to keep enjoying your summer before that time starts. So before we dive in together, I'd love to just settle in. So I invite you to find a comfortable seat, or you can stand if you've been sitting for a long time. When it comes to mindfully managing our classrooms, just settling in together can have a huge, huge impact. So just take a moment to ground down through your sits bones, lengthen through your spine. If you want, you could do some shoulder rolls. I know we carry a ton of the weight of the world on our shoulders, so just letting some of that weight go here. You can move in the opposite direction. And then just allow yourself to settle. Maybe you soften your gaze or you close your eyes and connect to your breath. Just observing the rise and the fall of each inhale and each exhale. And through each breath, maybe focusing on something you're grateful for. It can be anything. And then another thing that you're grateful for, just bringing that to mind, to heart. And as you continue to breathe, just filling yourself up with gratitude here. Taking on that attitude of gratitude by connecting to what you're grateful for. Bringing one hand to your heart and the other over that hand. Just take a moment here to notice how you're feeling. And at Breathe for Change, one of our favorite SEL practices, which we'll dive into today, is called the 2-word check-in. So I invite you to find 2 words that describe the vibe of what is happening inside you right now. Just 2 words. If your eyes are closed, you can gently open them. Come on back into the space. If you're on video, you could wave to each other. And I invite you to put your 2 words into the chat just so we can see what we're all coming in here with, knowing everything is welcome. Grateful and curious. Awesome. Delicious and happy. Love it. Grateful, ready, relaxed, curious, joy and peaceful, excited and content, centered and strong, relaxed, happy, hot, frantic, calm, centered, grateful, thrilled, relaxed, content, happy, full, excited. Awesome, y'all. All right. So just a little bit about me for those, raise your hand if you're new to Breathe for Change. Oh, yay. So exciting. Or you could put into the chat. Hi. So for those of you who I haven't met yet, again, my name's Ilana. I'm the founder and CEO of Breathe for Change, and just a little bit about me. So I am a former pre-K teacher. I taught here where I am now in San Francisco. And when I was teaching, I was stressed and overwhelmed and overworked. And that's when I first found yoga and many of the wellness practices that I'm going to be teaching you today. And it just completely transformed my life and my well-being, so much so that I ended up incorporating so many of these social emotional learning and mindfulness practices into my classroom with my kids, and just saw extraordinary transformations in them, not only social emotionally, but also academically. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome. This needs to be further explored. So I ended up pursuing my PhD in curriculum and instruction and becoming a teacher educator at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And my dissertation only further revealed how universal the issue of educator stress and burnout is, and how powerful these wellness and mindfulness and social emotional learning practices can truly be for both educators and students' lives, and also educators' ability to mindfully manage their classrooms. And so as I was seeing how universal the issues were and how powerful these practices were, I was like, all right, nothing's going to stop me. I'm starting a movement. It's going to enhance the health and well-being of our incredible educators, students, and entire communities. And that's when Breathe for Change was born. And it's wild to think that my baby, that is now a big grown movement, started 8.5 years ago. And the first thing we launched was our 200-hour mindfulness SEL and yoga teacher training. I see some of our grads in here. We've certified over 10,000 educators now throughout the United States and beyond through our 200-hour training. And also, since COVID, have taken our trainings into the online space to make our programs accessible to educators everywhere. So now we have our mindful classroom management course that we're launching, and I'm super excited to give you a taste of what that's about today. And we also partner with schools, districts, and organizations to enhance educator and student well-being. So super, super excited to connect with all of you today to dive into the topic of mindful classroom management, which, let's be honest, is probably top of mind for all of us all the time when we're in schools. How do we do it? So let's dive in. All right, so here is what we are up to today. I want to talk to you all about is like, how do we mindfully manage our classrooms, especially as we're preparing for back to school? So the number one intention of this webinar is for you to enhance your own physical, mental, and social emotional well-being through engaging in some of these mind-body wellness practices that you can use from here on out in your classrooms. And that's because you matter and your well-being matters so much. And then you also will walk away with tools and techniques to draw on what we call our Breathe for Change Thrive method, which we use as a mindful classroom management framework so that you can mindfully manage your classrooms moving forward. Additionally, my intention is that you feel equipped to facilitate some awesome and foundational social emotional learning and wellness practices that will help your students thrive in the classroom. And ultimately, community is at the heart of everything that we do at Breathe for Change. So I hope that you feel that connection with the other amazing educators and leaders in this space who are also committed to using wellness as a vehicle for healing and social change. So as I mentioned, when we're talking about mindful classroom management, we're not only talking about the students, right? It starts with us. And we need to take care of ourselves. We need to fill our cups up. We need to ensure that our mental, physical, and social emotional well-being is taken care of so that ultimately we have the capacity to be able to effectively manage our classrooms and support our students in thriving. So this is our wheel of well-being that we use in many of our trainings at Breathe for Change. As you can see, that inner circle is really focused on our own personal well-being as educators. And you can also think about this framework and is for use for your students too, right? We all each need to take care of our mental well-being, our mental health, our physical well-being, and our social emotional well-being. And then from that foundation, we have greater capacity to be able to enhance well-being in our interpersonal relationships, and ultimately to be able to effectively engage at the collective community level. So just know that everything that we're teaching or talking about today starts from that circle and will ripple effect out. And so, as I mentioned, my dissertation revealed that critical connection between our own well-being and student learning. So, one of my students or teachers I was following for my dissertations would say something like, if I am stressed, my students are stressed, or when I am calm and collected, my students are calm and collected. And that's really at the essence of what that wheel of well-being is all about, and why we ultimately want to start with ourselves and to support students in understanding how important their own health and well-being truly is to their learning. And so everything that we are going to be doing today is aligned with the 5 social emotional learning competencies, or the CASEL competencies. So self-awareness is our foundation. And as teachers and leaders, when we're able to cultivate a mindful awareness of our present moment experience, whether it's of our breath, of our body, of our emotions, or of our thoughts, and we're also able to teach our students to do this for themselves, we ultimately enhance our ability to manage and regulate ourselves and mindfully respond to whatever is showing up in the moment. We also become more aware of who we are teaching, what their needs are, and how we can address those needs within our classroom. We also become better equipped and prepared to build those meaningful and trusting relationships that are so essential to effectively managing our classrooms. And then ultimately, when we are taking care of ourselves and supporting our students and doing the same, we make better decisions that honor and represent the diversity within our community. And so we're going to start right here with our own embodiment of these. So just for a moment, I want to talk about the distinction between self-awareness, which, is that moment when we're like, how do I feel? What's happening in my body? What thoughts and emotions are present for me? When we strengthen our own self-awareness skills and we support our students in doing the same, ultimately, what we are doing is also cultivating better self-management skills, that second social emotional learning competency. So later, when times get tough in our classroom, and we know that they will, behaviors show up in ways we don't want or we weren't prepared for, then we can pause, notice how we feel, and draw on the practices that we'll be teaching you today to ultimately bring ourselves back to center. So Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankel couldn't have put it more clearly. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. So in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so when we're thinking about classroom management, it's in that moment of self-awareness when we realize either, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so sad, or wow, I notice my students are feeling really sad, or maybe it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so upset right now. And, or I see my students, fighting or being angry at each other, or whatever it is. It's in that moment of pause that we are gifted the opportunity to make a mindful choice in how we respond. So ultimately, we get to ask ourselves, and we can help our students ask themselves, do I want to keep feeling this way? Or do I want to amplify the way I'm feeling? Maybe I'm feeling really focused and engaged and inspired. Maybe let's amplify that a little bit. Or in the sense that when, in the context of classroom management, usually it's in those moments of stress, overwhelm, anxiety, anger, reactivity, that the question we'll probably be asking ourselves, or having our students ask themselves, is, do I want to change the way I'm feeling? And so at Breathe for Change, in our mindful classroom management course, we've created what we call the Breathe for Change Thrive method. It's like my favorite thing that we've ever developed, and I am so excited about it. It is MTSS aligned. So we're talking a multi-tiered system of support. It aligns with all different behavioral systems that are implemented across the United States and in your schools and districts and surrounding communities. And we've really woven together the key elements to put together a mindful classroom management framework that you can draw on in steps that is super easily implementable. And so the Thrive method consists of 6 steps. The first one is the T, which is teaching expectations, right? In the very beginning, when we're starting the school year, you have to think through, what are the expectations that I want to set with my students? How am I going to support my classroom in thriving so they ultimately know how to show up fully for their learning experience? So once you've thought through those expectations, and I'll walk you through a framework for how you can do that, we go way deeper in the course. Then, right, are your students always going to, are they always going to follow the expectations? The answer is absolutely not, right? We've all been there. I wish, right? I wish I could be like, oh yeah, once you have the T done, you're good to go. It'll be seamless. But that's not always true. And so that's where H comes in. And I think that honoring experience is so critical. And I want to talk a little bit about this because this is the step I think we often forget to do. So, if students show up, they either, break or don't follow the community agreements, or maybe a fight breaks out, or they're disobeying, the rules that you've set, whatever it is, it's super important to honor what is present, to acknowledge what's happening, the emotions, the experiences, both in yourself and in your students, and to kind of come from a place of acceptance here. I think so often we very, very quickly react like that. Don't do that, do this. And then what we're doing there is we're setting our students up to feel like they can't be safe in our space. And so honoring experiences is all about like acknowledging what's happening from a mindful place. That's difficult, but there's tons of tools to do that. And we'll talk through some of those. From there, that's where the R comes in. Then from that place of acknowledging whatever happens based on the challenges that are arising, how do we respond mindfully, right? Take a pause, think about maybe what practices we might facilitate to support this moment, what conversations need to be had to get us back on track. And there are so many different ways to do that. How do we effectively communicate? Then from there, we move into I. The I is about identifying opportunities for growth, right? So we taught the expectations, we honored the experiences that showed up in the space, and we responded mindfully in that moment to just address whatever was there. But how do we then bring it back to, okay, now that this has all happened, how can we grow from this experience? What can we do differently? Maybe we need to alter our community agreements. Maybe there's other things that need to happen so that ultimately we can set ourselves up to grow and learn more effectively moving forward, given what happened. That's I. V is validate progress. So this one is like, okay, now that we've set up, our vision, our opportunities for growth, how are we celebrating our students along the way? How are we weaving in gratitude, acknowledgement, and really intrinsically motivating our students to work towards their ultimate goals of excellence? And then last and not least, E, empower transformations. How are we ensuring that our students are having a transformative learning experience through everything that we're teaching and how we're engaging? So that's our Thrive method. And in that teaching expectations, in that section of the course and our curriculum at Breathe for Change, the teach expectation, the T in Thrive, we have what's called the Breathe for Change approach, or Breathe is the acronym. So I'll walk you through what each of these letters reflect, and then I'll teach you some practices along the way that you can weave in as you're setting expectations in the beginning of the school year for your students. So the first pillar of Breathe is begin. So this is where you need to think through, and you can do this also in collaboration with your students. How do we arrive together, right? How do we begin? The moment you walk into my classroom, how do we begin together? So how do we connect with each other, right? Are we coming in on our cell phones, or are we putting our cell phones away, saying hi to each other, sitting in the seats? Like, how do we actually begin? And then ultimately, how do we settle in together? Like during our webinar today, at the very beginning, before I dove into the content, I said, let's just take a moment and settle in. And we did a little breathing activity. I connected to you, to what you're grateful for. And I had you check in and share with me how you're feeling. So ultimately I could respond based on how you're feeling in the moment. All of that falls under begin. Then the second pillar of the Breathe for Change approach is our routine. Here is where it's super important as you're thinking through expectations, like what is the agenda that I'm teaching? What's our intention for our time together? And what do we ultimately need, right? Your students might need certain materials. They might need to understand ultimately what they need to bring, how they want to show up, all of that. So the agenda, you can think about this as the high level routine of how you're going to structure your day or your period or your time together, so that you provide students with some reliability and consistency. And they need to know this up front so that they can ultimately land in their learning experience. That's R. So that's the things we're going to think through there. Then next, engagement, which is the third pillar, E. So when you're thinking through, and these questions you can ask yourself in literally every day that you teach, you can use this as a framework. How are we interacting during our time together? How do we participate, right? Talking to students about how you expect them to participate with each other, what their volume level is, how you want them to be engaging with one another, right? Is this like independent time? Is it group time? How are we supposed to be showing up for each other? Those are all super important expectations to set with students so they know what to do and what not to do when it comes to engagement. The fourth pillar is activity. So this you can think of as like more specific than routine. Routine is like your overall routine that's more consistent on a daily basis. Activity is like literally, what are we doing right now? What are our objectives? What are the outcomes that we want to experience together during this time, whether it's like a math lesson, a literacy activity, maybe, you're going on a field trip. What's the activity that we're doing, and having really clear context and framing for how you want students to be engaging in that activity. What are the outcomes? So they understand ultimately where you desire them to end up. The T in the Breathe for Change approach, so pillar 5 is transitions. This one I also feel is something that gets lost, but is so important. And it can be a time suck if we don't think through how are we going to transition from one thing to the next. And so the questions you might think about is like, where are we at, in this moment? Maybe you're transitioning from the end of a literacy lesson and you're moving into recess. Where are we at? Where are we going? And ultimately, how are we going to get there? physically, mentally, emotionally. Maybe you're going to use a breathing technique to transition from one thing to the next. Maybe you're going to do some mindful movement in that transition. There's a lot of different things that you can do to make the transition from one activity to the next super mindful and collaborative. And then the sixth pillar, H, is help. Actually thinking about, how do I set expectations around how students can help themselves and each other, right? Things are going to show up. People are going to need support. So having students be able to answer the question, what support do we need, right? So they thinking about how can you create space for your students to communicate what support they need. And then what support can we offer, right? So encouraging students to think through how can they support one another and how can you support them. And then I'll be teaching you a bunch of mind body wellness and SEL strategies, but what tools can we draw on, right? If we're in a stressful moment, maybe we need to take 3 collective breaths together. Maybe we need to just wiggle out our bodies and do some movement. Maybe I need to just take out my journal and do some reflection. So you're going to be teaching your students these different tools that ultimately when they need it, they can draw on them too for their own health and well-being. And then the last pillar is excellence. And so you want to have your students think through, what does excellence look like for me, right? If they are connected to their own vision for excellence, they're going to be way more effectively able to engage in the learning. And then this is where the community aspect really comes in. What are your expectations around excellence for us? As a classroom community, what does excellence look like for us? You really taking some time to think through that and also engaging in conversations with your students around that is so important. And then ultimately, how can we celebrate our success along the way? So this is a framework that you can use and questions that you can draw on as you're setting up for your classroom this year, thinking through, okay, how are we going to begin together? What are my routines going to look like? How do I want my students to be engaging with each other? What activities am I going to be doing generally? How do I want to transition my students? How can I support them in asking and giving help? And then ultimately, what is excellence? So, as I mentioned, I will be sharing just a couple of our favorite practices that we will be, or that we do at Breathe for Change, that I'll be that you'll learn not only today, but if you take our mindful classroom management course, you'll learn way more than this. And the practices that I'm going to be teaching you, you can use both responsively and proactively. What I mean by responsively is that there's a heightened moment of stress. You taught the expectations and someone or the group didn't follow them, right? In that moment, you can draw on these practices to mindfully respond as opposed to react. So that's the responsive approach. But then you can also use them proactively. And this is where you really set your students up for success from the very beginning. So what I mean by proactively is that you're thinking about the different moments in your routine between activities and transitions, all of that, where ultimately you are integrating these mind, body wellness and social emotional learning practices in. So they're happening on a consistent basis. What this does is it not just creates a culture of mindfulness and connection within your classroom community, but it also really decreases overall reactivity for you and your students over time. And it enhances overall well-being and, obviously fosters more effective teaching and learning. So both are important, right? You can draw on these practices in those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? I wasn't expecting that. And then also put them in your daily routines. So with that, Let's take on a few. So the breath is absolutely key when it comes to mindfully managing our classroom. And then you might be like, huh, what? But the breath is what can take us from a sympathetic state, meaning that fight, flight, freeze, stress response, to a parasympathetic state. That means that rest, digest, more centered state of being. Now, in the classroom, you can facilitate these practices for your entire classroom community on a consistent basis. Like you might settle in with 3 collective breaths or belly breathing, in morning circle, or right before, when your students are seated at their desk, right as they walk in. That might be the way you begin, right? You can also, once you've taught them or these practices as a classroom, you can encourage your students individually to draw on them as tools to support their well-being and manage themselves when they need it. So let's do a couple of these together. So we'll start with 3 collective breaths. And I love this one so much because it is so simple. Like literally all we're doing is taking 3 breaths together, but it can be profoundly healing and incredibly focusing. So just find your comfortable seat. And I invite you to take 3 collective breaths together. So take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Again, inhale. Exhale. Breathe in. Out with a huge sigh. Now just bring your hands to your heart and just take a moment. Notice how you feel after those 3 breaths together. And I invite you, if you're feeling courageous, just put it into the chat. How do you feel? 1 word, 2 words, whatever is coming to you after those 3 breaths. Calm, light, at ease, relaxed, tranquility, excited, spacious, relaxing, serene, relaxed, calmer, more at peace, present, peaceful, lots of relax. Y'all, that was like 10 seconds. And think about, look at those words in the chat. That's not just one of you. That's not 2 of you. It's like essentially everyone is expressing a more centered state, focused, peaceful, relaxed, present, calmer. Imagine if you began every class with 3 collective breaths in your routine. That's game changing, right? And then students can learn, wow, I feel more relaxed. I feel more focused. So when times get tough, they can ultimately draw on that practice for themselves. That's why it is so important. And you'll notice I do this for every practice with you. Super, super important to not only do the practice, the 3 collective breaths, and then move on with your life. It's just as important to ask the question and to create a little space, a moment. Hey, bring your hands to your heart. Notice how you feel. What's happening inside, right? Have that moment of reflection so you and your students can name and identify the emotions that they're experiencing as a result of this practice. That's what turns it into a tool. Then they're like, ooh, I'm feeling stressed. I'm going to do that breathing practice that makes me feel focused or relaxed or calmer. That makes sense? Super, super important. So another breathing practice that you can use is belly breathing. Raise your hand if you know of some variation of belly breathing. Some of you, Elmo at Sesame Street has a whole belly breathing thing. And I know it all too well because my 22-month-old is literally always dressed in Elmo and obsessed with Elmo. But at Breathe for Change, we have a few different variations of belly breathing. I know that some of you are working in early childhood or in elementary school settings, whereas others are working in middle school or high school or with adults or at the college level. And so obviously we all need to differentiate based on who our students are and how old they are and where they come from, what they're interested in. So I'm inviting you for just a moment to grab a hold of your inner child hats, put them on. So whatever you teach, I invite you to tap into your inner child, maybe be your 5-year-old self, your 8-year-old self, your 3-year-old self, or your 10-year-old self. And we're going to do bare belly breathing. So I invite you to bring out your bear paws. Let me see. Awesome. And now let me hear your big bear growls. Come on off mute. You got it. There we go. And now bring your bear paws to your big bear bellies. Inhale, fill your big bear belly with breath. Exhale, let it go. Again, inhale, filling your big bear belly with breath. Exhale, release. Biggest bear belly breath of the day. Out with a huge bear sigh. Now bring your bear paws to your big, beautiful bear hearts. Just take a moment and notice how you feel after those bear belly breaths. And whenever you feel ready, you can put that into the chat. Let me know how you feel. Happy, free, happy, love the group dynamic. Oh yeah, it's so much more fun in person too. Your kids will get into it. You could do bear belly breath. You could do, ask them what animals they like, rainbow breath. You can do any type of breathing that you think your students are going to love. Relax, great. Kids will love that. Fun, good, light, terrific. Awesome. So for all of you early childhood and elementary folks or parents of young children at home, hopefully that one is one you'll put in your back pocket. And now let's do a variation that might be a little more relevant for the older students, secondary, college level students, adults. So I invite you to find a comfortable seat. Ground down through your sits bones. You can lengthen through your spine. I invite you to bring your hands to your belly. And on the next inhale, fill your belly with breath. And on the next exhale, just let that breath go. Inhale, feeling your belly expand. And exhale, letting the breath go. Doing a few more rounds of this belly breathing at your own breath. Feeling your rib cage expand, your belly, and then release. And then whenever you feel complete with this practice, you can bring your hands to your heart, or maybe a hand to your heart and one to your belly. And just take a moment to check in with yourself. Notice how you're feeling. And then if your eyes are closed, you can gently open them. You can share what that experience was like in the chat. Just noticing how things are shifting and changing inside you. Thanks, Shirley. Light. Awesome. And so you can see these breathing practices can have a profound effect. And in general, the breathing practices, you're saying it in the chat right now, they bring us back to the present moment, right? They help us cultivate awareness, that sense of calm and ease and groundedness, right? But sometimes that isn't what we might need in a certain moment, right? In some moments, your students might feel disengaged, tired, distracted, and maybe what they need is something more movement oriented, not necessarily the breathing, grounding, centered practice. So that's why we have a wide range of tools that we can draw on. So I just want to talk a little bit about mindful movement for a moment. So at Breathe for Change, we obviously have our 200-hour mindfulness SEL and yoga teacher training. So we have tons of mindful movement strategies that you can incorporate into your teaching, into the classroom. And again, the movement is so important for like our physical well-being, our ability to focus, to stay engaged. And so there's so many different simple practices that you can draw on, literally from the seat of your own chair. Your students are sitting in their chairs, maybe they're sitting at circle time, wherever they are, you can immediately facilitate a few movement practices very quickly, and it'll save you time later. I get very, very often the fear from educators, like, I don't have time for this. What if what do I need to cut in order to weave in SEL and mindfulness? And I'm like, oh, honey, you don't need to cut anything. It'll buy you back time. If you take a few minutes to do these things, your students will be so much more engaged and focused for the remainder of your class that you'll have extra time and be like, how did that just happen? So let's do a couple of mindful movement practices that you can literally integrate into your classroom. I was going to say tomorrow, but hopefully not tomorrow. Hopefully that you have a few more days of summer left to enjoy. So earlier we did some shoulder rolls. So just move your shoulder in either direction. And then whenever you feel ready, you can switch directions. Again, we carry a ton of weight on our shoulders, a lot of tension and stress. So you can literally do this at any point in your day, but just for, I see some of you going like this. Yeah, awesome. You can get creative. And now just take a moment and notice the sensations in your body. Notice how you feel. If you'd like, you can throw it into the chat. What was that like to just do some shoulder rolls? And if you think for just a moment, bringing it back to your teaching of expectations, when might be a good time, whether it's on a consistent daily basis or maybe before some activity, for you to lead your students through shoulder rolls? You can put it into the chat. We can learn from each other. There's brilliance in the space. When might be a good time? Transitions, yeah, like you're moving from one activity to the next. Changing whole group to small group after recess, yes. If they're getting frustrated with a math problem, beautiful. Love the scenario thinking. Ready for work from the whole group after group work to calm craziness testing, yes. Perfect. Love it. So you're starting to see how they fit into your routine. All right. So next up, I invite you to find a comfortable seat. You can bring your hands to your heart. You could do this in a chair. You could do this seated on the floor. And then inhale, reach your arms up to the sky. And exhale, hands come back to heart center. Beautiful. Inhale, reach up, rise up, look up. And exhale, hands return back to your heart. One more time, inhale, reach up. And this time, on the exhale, bring your right hand down, left fingertips reach up and over. And we'll do a nice side stretch or a side bend here. Just feeling that stretch along your left side. Take a deep breath in. Deep breath out. And then gently, mindfully come back through center. Inhale, reach back up high. And then exhale, we'll move on to the opposite side. So left hand down, right hand up and over. Take a deep breath here. Let something go. And then come on back. Just take a moment. You can bring your hands to your lap or to your heart. Just notice how you feel. After those sun breaths, that's what we call those breaths where your hands are centered at your heart and you reach them up to the sky and back to your heart. That's a sun breath. And the side breaths, just notice. Put it into the chat. Let's see how you feel. Renewed, yay, more awake and alert. Awesome. Felt good. Energetic. More energetic, right? So if you think about it, when might be a good time to add that in? That movement, right? One breath per movement, or the side bends, ready to go. Less tense. Before class starts, right? You want your students to be engaged, like ready to learn, ready to go. Perfect. Before an intense moment, yep, maybe before like a test. If kids are tired, exactly, right? Your kids are lethargic, tired, checked out. You're like, oh, mindful movement. And then boom, we feel more energized and we're back to the learning. It's so good. So good. Right after safety drill at the end of the day, last lesson before math, after lunch. So many great ideas. Incredible. So those are just a couple of examples, right? We did some shoulder rolls. You have the sun breaths, these ones, just one breath per movement. Inhale, reach up, exhale, back to center. You could do side bends. You could also do side or twists to the right or to the left side. Those release tension. So there's a lot of different movements that you can just play with. And then your students can end up teaching each other. So those are practices that connect us to the breath. And then it's really important, as I've been talking about, to also connect your students to their emotions and for us to connect to our emotions. So we've done the 2-word check-in. I did that for you at the beginning of our time together, where I invited you to just connect to your breath, notice how you're feeling in general, and then find 2 words that describe how you're feeling. That's the 2-word check-in. The 2-word check-in is incredible because it cultivates self-awareness, specifically emotional awareness. And what it does for us as educators is it allows us to be in tune with and aware of how our students are experiencing the moment. How do they feel? Which ultimately gives us insight into what they need and how we can respond, right? If we're getting a lot of, I feel tired, I feel sad, I feel exhausted, maybe you do some mindful movement before you move on. If they're feeling frazzled and overwhelmed and stressed, maybe you do a breathing practice and then you move on. If they're feeling like some tragedy just broke out and it's very obvious based on their emotion words, maybe you take some time to like have a community circle before moving on to your math content, right? Because that's what's actually needed in this space for them to be able to learn. So the 2-word check-in is amazing. It is a very fast way to get a pulse of what's happening in the room. And I highly recommend that you not only have them think of their 2 words, but to share the 2 words out loud so that you can hear how they're feeling. And then you can be more responsive as a teacher. When we were doing our trainings in person, I would have like over 100 people go in a circle and share their 2 words. And it took like 3 minutes for 100 people. So you can definitely, as long as you're really clear, share your 2 words and your 2 words only, please. Don't like elaborate because this, and that. You can hear everybody's 2 words. It's the power of that practice. And then the weather report is another way to help your students and you connect to your emotions. This practice is really awesome because for many of us, it's really difficult to actually identify and name our emotions, even if we're feeling and experiencing them. It's like a whole nother skill set to be able to say, I feel sad, even though you might be like experiencing the sensations and the feeling of sadness inside you. It can be hard to identify what's going on sometimes inside. Do you raise your hand if you've ever had that experience where you're like, something's going on, but I can't name it? So the weather report helps us and our students in those situations. It can be really amazing for students who have varying learning abilities, or who have challenges with their emotions. So the weather report, I'll guide you through it right now, invites us to think about how we feel, but specifically through the lens of choosing a weather, your internal weather report. So find a comfortable position, and you can ground down through your sits bones, lengthen through your spine. I invite you to just take a moment to connect to your breath. We'll do an internal weather report. So I invite you to just really think about how you're feeling right now. And I want you to think about what weather is reflective of what's going on inside. Are you feeling sunny and warm today? Maybe there's a thunderstorm happening inside, or it's clear or cloudy, windy, maybe dark and stormy. So just noticing what is happening inside you and taking your internal weather report. And then whenever you have your internal weather report, you can open your eyes if they're closed. And I invite you to share your weather report in the chat. Clear, breezy, sunny with a calm breeze, windy, pink sunset, sunrisey, awesome, slight breeze in the shade, pleasant, cloudy, sunny and calm, awesome. Overcast with silver linings in some spots, clear and warm, sunny blooms starting. So you can feel the depth of what this different channel can do for us, right? It gives people a different way to access their emotion and communicate and talk about their emotions. It's so powerful. So this is just another variation, essentially, you can think about of the 2-word check-in, right? You're communicating your emotions, you're thinking about your emotions, but just through the lens of the weather. So that can be really, all of those can be really helpful. The 2-word check-in, the weather report, when you want a pulse of what's happening in the room. I love doing it at the beginning of every time I'm with my students. I did it with all of you, the 2-word check-in today to start. You could do a weather report to start. And you're like, I know where my students are walking, what my students are walking in with. And I can teach from that place of awareness. You can also do it like after a learning experience, maybe at the end. It's also a great closing to either an experience or the day. So you know what students are walking away with. Wow, I feel so grateful and inspired and engaged and curious, or I'm feeling bored. And, it gives you so much insight into what's happening in their experience and how things landed for them. So you could do it both before and after anything that you teach. And then last but not least, it is so, so powerful to connect students to their thoughts in a positive way. Gratitude, I did that with you in the beginning. I had you think through what you're grateful for. Cultivating that attitude of gratitude in your classroom is truly going to set your students up to thrive. So you can have your students have a gratitude journal. You can invite them to share with their, a partner next to them, 3 things they're grateful for at the beginning or at the start of an activity, or, as a community builder. You can do, you could guide them through a meditation like I did, where they think about what they're grateful for, or you can lead, and I teach you how to do this in our course. You can lead your students through an appreciation circle, open up space I'd love to open up space for an appreciation circle so you can all, whoever feels called, can share what you're grateful for. All of these things allow students to have that like culture of celebration and appreciation as the foundation of your community. And affirmations are super powerful too. This is another practice where you come up with a message or a belief that will serve you. Like, I am brilliant, I am strong, I can do this, we've got this, whatever it is. And this often can help us change our limiting beliefs into empowering beliefs. And you can have your students write down their affirmations or share their affirmations. And that can be something that you implement into your classroom in times where you feel like your students would benefit from having a really positive mindset. So I invite you to all share one thing in the chat that you're grateful for right now. Just one thing that you're grateful for. Family. Oh, cute. You create dots for affirmations. My healthy mind, family, summer break, time and space to reset, my children, grandchildren, ice cream, me too. Family. Oh, congrats on your new air conditioner. So you can just feel when you see when you have people connect to what they're grateful for, when you connect to what you're grateful for, it can be incredibly powerful for our minds, which ultimately impacts learning and your ability to manage your classroom. So gratitude is always a practice that I encourage you to draw on. So I hope that this was very useful and that you learned a few tools that you can walk away with. And as I mentioned, we are so excited because we are launching our mindful classroom management course. I sent you, or I shared with you, very, very basics. We go deep into the Thrive method of our, that I walked you through today in this course, and it'll be available back to school. We just launched it. We're super excited. And so if you are interested in signing up for this class or having your colleagues sign up for this course with us, ultimately, the idea is that it's going to support you in creating a thriving and consistent classroom environment and enhancing your students and your self-awareness and self-management skills. You'll learn to increase student engagement and active participation, just like what we started to do today. You'll learn way more. It's really designed to support you in reigniting your students' purpose and passion for learning, and ultimately fostering both psychological and physical safety in the classroom. And then ultimately, you'll gain tools to catalyze human connection in your community and reduce behavior challenges, which we know are happening day in and day out, to ultimately improve your students' outcomes. And then the course is accessible all online, so it's super easy and it's self-paced. You get access to these 9 modules, which, as you can see, it's an intro to our approach of mindful classroom management. You'll learn how to become a mindful classroom manager yourself, and then we'll walk you through those 6 steps of the Thrive method. And ultimately, you'll walk away with a clear action plan that you can implement in your classroom this year. And so if you are interested in signing up, this is, you just signed up. So cool. So this is like this is the work of my heart, love of my life. The link I put on the slide is also in the chat. You can check out our website. And right now, because we're launching it for back to school, and because you're here today, we wanted to honor you. And so you can get $100 off with the code B4C MCM, which is Mindful Classroom Management, 100 at the checkout. And that offer ends in 2 days. So I highly recommend that you register now and hold your spot. And again, this is something that we're seeing a lot of schools and districts signing up for too, not just individual educators can absolutely sign up, but you can also talk to your administrators and they can reach out to Breathe for Change if it's something that you want to implement at the school-wide level too. And there's so much curriculum and content that will help your entire school community in there. So whether it's just you taking it or bringing a couple friends along or getting your whole school on board, all of it's helpful, and you can share what you learn. So the first live session is in mid-August, the professional development session. There's 2 sessions like this that you can come live to. And then we have monthly coaching calls available for you ongoingly so that you can come. It'll be me and our other instructors will be leading it so that we can grapple with the things that are coming up for you and work through them. So you have both live professional development. And if you can't come to the live sessions, it's not a big deal. We'll record it and you can just watch the recording. And then all of those modules that I just shared with you are in like the form of a online course, and you can have access to all of the modules and all the lesson plans and content and resources and videos that are connected to those modules for as long as Breathe for Change is alive, which I hope it's well past my lifetime. So as long as we're alive, you'll have access to everything that you get in the course. So I hope to see you there. I'm obviously leading it and in collaboration with 3 of the most incredible educators, leaders, administrators that I know in the world. So it's going to be amazing. Thank you all so much. Again, if you need the information for the course, just click on that link and you can learn all the things and sign up there and make sure that you get your discount. Awesome. I hope this was helpful. Enjoy your summer. Soak it in, assuming that you're in summer, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.